Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CIC's webinar this evening on Charitable Chennai and how the city aligns during crisis. We have distinguished panelists here with us today, and we will begin the session in a bit with a welcome note by our trustee, Mr. Arvind Pandyan. But before I hand over the virtual stage to Arvind, a quick orientation and warm-up. This is a 90-minute webinar, and as audience, you will be able to see and listen to the panelists. And for interaction, you can choose to use the chat option there to type in your comments. But if you do have questions for the panelists, please feel free to use the Q&A section for the same. Over to our trustee Arvind, invite you to welcome the speakers and start the session, please.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Good evening. On behalf of the Chennai International Trust, I welcome one and all for today's web and virtual meeting. It's indeed a pleasure always to welcome you all, whether it's virtual or real. Today's subject, Charitable Chennai, assumes immense significance in these COVIDian times. I'm happy to welcome you, no doubt, in such a situation, which reminds only one nice, interesting quote by a very leading American researcher and Dr. Salk, who said, Anderson Salk, I've had many dreams, I've had many nightmares, but I've conquered all my nightmares because of my dreams. It's ironic that he's a virologist who was the first one to find out the vaccine for polio. And we are again dealing with the virus. Today we have a set of wonderful dreamers for the city who would like to conquer this nightmare of COVID. And just to introduce them, I'm here as a trustee of the center. Firstly, I would like to not introduce, but bring to this panel Mr. M. Murugappan, the well-known scion of the Murugappa family and one of the corporate pillars of Tamil Nadu, the executive chairman of the Murugappa Group and the corporate advisory board, and also on various boards of other companies. He brings with him an immense wealth of philanthropy and responsibility industry. We also have with us, on behalf of the authorities, the corporation, where the commissioner, Mr. Prakash, was supposed to join, but he's himself personally deputed his deputy commissioner, Dr. Albin John, who's a regional deputy commissioner of South Region, a doctor by profession, again ironic, turned an IAS officer in 2013. He's worked in the last 14 months in this capacity. Previously, he was Commissioner of Tuticorin Corporation and a Sub-Collector of Devakote. Welcome, Doctor. We also have with us the complete panel who are now involved in the present activity, which is helping the authorities, corporation, state, and also the citizens of Chennai. Mr. Ramaraj, a serial entrepreneur with a wealth of experience in his industry and in his capacity as various advisors to other co-founded institutions, is leading right now the Feed My Chennai, which is his credo at the moment. Next, we have Mr. Jayendra, one of the founders of Bhumika Trust, which he began his career in 1978, and with a wealth of experience, he's brought about a social consciousness along with his two colleagues, through which he's doing his human service, especially for migrant workers. Dr. Janaki Raman from the Chakra Foundation, he's a group counselor and psychologist, especially catering to the needs of senior citizens. And last but not the least, Mr. V. Sriram, no name needs introduction, and particularly him, an entrepreneur, columnist, historian, all rolled into one, an executive member of the Madras Music Academy, and whatnot about his walks of lectures and cultural sensation of Chennai. He's going to moderate this session. I'm quite sure that with all the pressures, tensions, and whatever mindset we are in, these dreamers are going to take us through what's happening to Chennai, and also the authorities telling us how they are taking care of the needy of Chennai. And I'm sure that the interaction from the audience also will be worth a wait for us. Thank you. I now hand it over to Mr. Sriram.
Sriram, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Arvind Pandian, for that introduction. Today we are in a strange situation. Normally we would all be together on stage with an audience facing us. And today we are all able to see each other on screen, and we assume that there is an audience out there that is listening to us. We've got Vanita's assurance that there is an audience that is attending on all of us and is listening to whatever we are saying. The colonial city of Chennai begins in 1639. And prior to that, several of our villages that became Chennai have existed from several centuries prior to that. And many of these older villages, for instance, carry examples of survivors during the time of pestilence, during the time of war, during the time of natural disasters. And you find Annadana Samajams at various of the older parts of the city, like, for instance, Mylapore, Purushavakkam, Georgetown. These were all areas that later become part of what we recognize today as Chennai. One of the long-standing witnesses to all the changes that our city has been through is the Corporation of Chennai. It begins in 1688, and it is today the oldest corporation outside of London in all that was once part of the British Empire, and in that I include the United States of America and Canada as well. So this is a remarkable record for the corporation of what was called the Corporation of Madras, which later becomes the Corporation of Chennai, and today is the Corporation of Greater Chennai. And representing that is Dr. Albie John, who is the RDC, the Deputy Commissioner for South Chennai. And I would like to begin with him because his is really the umbrella body under which all other caregivers and helpers are actually coordinating, because without this civic body, we wouldn't be able to handle this kind of a scenario. So we would like to start with you, Dr. Albie John, whom I'm meeting virtually for the first time, though we've been friends on Twitter for a number of years now. So it's a great pleasure meeting you here, and I look forward to meeting you sometime in person. But today, let's begin with you, and I'd request you to tell us about what are the great challenges that the corporation is facing and what have been the great initiatives.
Good evening, all. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. So, first of all, let me start by saying that I'm just standing in for my boss, Mr. Prakash, who is the Commissioner of Greater Chennai Corporation. And he asked me to express his apologies for not able to attend this wonderful webinar. He had some urgent commitments, and so he was unable to join, and I was deputed. So starting with, I would like to say that Chennai has been doing good. Chennai has been doing good when it comes to preventing the COVID pandemic when it is compared to various other cities in the country and across the globe. So we are more or less, our population is around 80 lakh. Our floating population, combined with the floating population, it is more or less a 1 crore plus city. So for a city with that kind of magnitude of population, we have registered 452 cases of COVID on date. And we hope that we will be able to prevent the disease also. So having said that, we have 157 containment zones in the city. As of now, the disease is more or less more prevalent in some particular zones of the city, which is the biggest one is zone 5, that is the Roypuram zone of the city. So as of now, the number of cases, the large number of cases are coming from certain zones, and we also have intensified our activities in these particular zones. And Chennai was the first city to start a pan-city active surveillance, mass active surveillance program. And now we are happy to say that many of the cities in India and across the globe are trying to emulate this model. So our pan-city mass active surveillance means one person from the civic body will be visiting each and every house in the city on a daily basis and looking for symptoms, the prospective COVID symptoms and other health conditions of the persons in the city also. So this has been a huge help for us in identifying the disease, identifying the risk factors. I mean, as all of us know, old age and other comorbidities are a risk factor when it comes to COVID. So it has been a great help in identifying those risk factors, and in 2 or 3 situations, it has helped us in identifying the disease at the spot itself. So that we have been doing. And probably I would like to say Chennai is the first city to come with an app where you can register if you have a symptom also. So we have been doing all sort of activities, starting from the active surveillance that I have mentioned, passive surveillance. All our hospitals, our own hospitals and the private hospitals are on the job, and we are getting feedback from them on a daily basis. We are doing intensive risk communication through various conventional and non-conventional strategies. And one thing we have been doing, again, we are the pioneers in the country in doing this. We have been ensuring containment zones quite in a strict matter, and we have been ensuring strict perimetering also. So to top it all, we had excellent cooperation from the citizens of Chennai. The citizens of Chennai were very understanding, were very supportive, and more or less the regulations, the strict regulations in place were always obliged. I know it is very difficult to have a lockdown getting extended for 30 plus days is not a pleasant thing for anybody, but our citizenry was very patient, and I would like to express our sincere thanks for that. And again, with that, we were also privileged to get associated with so many non-governmental organizations, which includes charitable organizations, residential associations, other citizen groups. So all of them were very helpful in mitigating various crises, starting from the issue with regard to the migrant labor, or with regard to homeless people, or with regard to spreading awareness against the disease. So whatever the issues are, we were very fortunate to have a very active citizenry and a lot of active citizen groups also. So I would like to express our sincere thanks for that also. And with all your support, we will be doing whatever that is possible to contain this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Albijon, because I think you brought it to a very nice level where you have brought in the involvement of the private groups as well as the the individual citizen initiatives. And I think that really sets the tone for us to move on to the other panelists as well. I'd like to start with Mr. Murugapan of the Murugappa Group. And I'd just like to preface that by stating that today we may call it corporate social responsibility. We may say that this is organizations expressing themselves and helping society. But the Nagaratar community has been doing it from time immemorial. This was part of their philosophy of business. It is not something, this is not a term that has come today. The English term corporate social responsibility may not have been used, but they have been practicing it, and there are enough and more inscriptions all across South India that talk about the Nagaratar community's contribution to society in times of trouble, in times of distress. And one of the constituents of the Murugappa Group, interestingly, is PARI, which is probably one of the oldest registered organizations in the country, which is still continuing to function. And PARI has been a witness to every one of the challenges that Chennai has faced from 1788 onwards. It's not something that is small. It's a unique record that one corporate entity has been able to see all the changes that the city has been through. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to hand over the mic to Mr. M.M. Murugapan and request him to share with us an instance of how his corporate is contributing to this situation.
Thank you, Sriram, and thank you, CIC, and to my fellow panelists. Thank you for all that you do for our city. I'm greatly honored to share a platform with all of you. It's indeed very humbling. Sriram, thank you for this introduction. We love Chennai. This is a city where we personally, I've been born. Of course, I've grown up in many other places, but eventually I am back here. For us, we look upon our responsibility, not just as a responsibility, is our duty. And this has been happening for over a century. And we have been focusing predominantly all these years on education and healthcare. And quite clearly, at this point in time, whatever we can do within our sphere of influence for our city, we certainly have extended a hand and also are working closely with various organizations. To us, it does not matter whom we work with, but the objectives of what we need to address is something that we are very conscious about. From just a healthcare perspective, we have been requested by the government, and we are also very greatly honored that they have, to set aside beds in our hospital in Ambattur Ravadi for COVID isolation and also COVID cases. And across all our factories, which are dotted in and around Chennai, we have left.
Ivan Stedeford Hospital, sir?
That's right. And across all the manufacturing locations which are in and around Chennai in particular, I mean, I will restrict myself to Chennai. We are doing a lot of work in other parts of our country because we are pretty much pan-India right now. But in Chennai, we have left with all our operating heads of businesses and factories sufficient budgets to support society locally. And this is something that they do of their own. It's not so much providing monetary resources, but it's people providing their time as well. And this is something that voluntarily a lot of people within the Murugappa group and associated with organizations in different parts of the city are working in a variety of areas. One particular area that we are working in, though not in Chennai, but we are working very closely with the collectorate at Cuddalore. This has been an age-old tradition with Paris having been located near Cuddalore, the sugar mill. And right from the tsunami time, the district administration, supported by the state's executive administration here in Chennai, have been asking us to partner with them. So we are literally working as partners with the district authorities in Cuddalore, be it in education, be it in healthcare, be it in food support, food services, and even in terms of some of the pharmaceutical requirements they have on a regular basis. They've also asked us for equipment, which their hospital does not have, which we have ordered. And so this partnership has been a unique partnership right from the time the tsunami struck. And what really struck me at the tsunami time, when there was a TV anchor who asked one of the affected persons, and what should the government do? And the affected person, an elderly lady, said, please don't change the collector at that time. And we've been working at that time, the collector was Gagandeep. And I must say this story because we struck up a great friendship after that. And so the association with the Cuddalore district as a partner still remains. And that's what we have been doing. It's been across a variety of areas, including transportation of migrant workers back to their respective locations with all the suitable permissions, supplying food to the Amma canteens, and also supplying food services from our own canteens, keeping our hospital in Nellikuppam in readiness as a COVID isolation unit, as and when it's required by the district authorities. So it's a partnership that we are very happy to work with, and it works seamlessly. It's more like even operating people in the district administration just call us and says, "Sir, engalukku idu venum, konjam panni vidunga." So, and that's all. I mean, everything else works very seamlessly. So, so these are the kind of partnerships I think Chennai and Tamil Nadu are known for, and we are quite happy to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that. I now move on to the how do you feed a city? And I mean, I talk about feeding the city. I'm not referring to the people who are foraging in the supermarkets and the malls and stocking their homes with arrabbiata sauce and things like that. I'm talking about people for whom the next meal itself is a question mark. And Chennai has had long instances of hunger and also people coming forward to satisfy that hunger. If you look at the Stanley Medical Hospital, for instance, in Rayapuram, locally, nobody will talk of it as the Stanley Medical Hospital. Everybody will talk of it as the Kanji Totti Hospital. The name Kanji Totti comes from the great famines that Chennai faced in the 17th and the 18th century, when public gruel kitchens would be set up in that particular location. People could go there and they could be fed. The great Avvai in Tamil says, Ayyam ittu un. First offer the food to those who need it, and then you eat. And so with that brief introduction, I'm going to move on to Mr. Ramraj to speak about Feed My Chennai and what this initiative is doing in order to keep this city above hunger. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Sriram. I'll start by sharing what we have done so far. With the corporation permission, we started serving individually packed lunches and dinner from the 7th of April. Today, 18 days later, at lunch today, we have crossed 5 lakh meals. That is what this group has been able to do. I thought it would be interesting to share the story behind how this got done in such a short time. I think it is the power of networks. And the power of networks, 4 networks came together in this instance. First was the power of entrepreneurs. K. Ganesh of Big Basket and other in Bangalore called up Gopal Srinivasan and me to share what they were doing in Bangalore, Feed My Bangalore and Feed My City, and wanted to know whether we would do this in Chennai. We said yes, and before we knew it, we had a core group of entrepreneurs who came together to help coordinate this whole initiative. Came out again from networks from TIE and IIM Calcutta Alumni Association. So we are a core group of 9 people. So the first network was a network of entrepreneurs. The second network was a network of kitchens. Ganesh told us that, introduced us to a company that aggregates kitchens across the country. Fortunately for us, the kitchens that were pointed out to us here belong to Anna Lakshmi. So it is not just the restaurant, but they have corporate kitchens, which brought with it 3 things. We didn't have to worry about quality, we didn't have to worry about taste, and we didn't have to worry about scale. These 3 things, these kitchens of Anna Lakshmi just took over. What we, the core group, worked with them was around, under this new environment, how to strengthen hygiene. So taking temperature of all the employees 3 times a day, some sanitizing, things like that, to make sure cooks, helpers, and the individual packing of the meals, that's a large team, how they were maintained hygiene through this whole process. 2 examples I thought would be interesting. One was, while a meal was important, we wanted to make sure that there was nutrition. 1700 to 1800 calories is what was calculated by the TVS doctor and said we ought to be giving that. So we made sure vegetables, peanuts, whatever was being used to help get that nutrition right. Second was, we are all sitting in our homes and hoping all this is going on, there are cameras, etc. So in order to do a random sampling of quality, we requested that as they went to the different places to drop off food at the shelters, at random to drop one at the core committee's houses. So we got, I for example got for lunch a vegetable biryani in a foil pack. I kept it till 1:30. And I saw that at 1:30, the food was warm, it was tasty, and it was more than filling. I couldn't finish. My wife had to join me. And it was really well worth, I thought it was something that people would enjoy. I did. So it was simple ways in an unusual environment. How do you do quality checks? How do you do random sampling? The third network was a network of volunteers. The corporation told us, gave us 15 zones and 92 centers. That meant from Tiruvatiur to Sholinganallur, food had to reach before 12:30 for lunch and before 7 for dinner. 100 to 115 volunteers came. Their commitment and their sincerity is what really made this project successful so far. Incredible effort of these volunteers, and they've just come together in order to help. 115 volunteers, afternoon and night, making sure this worked. The fourth, and I think equally important pillar or network, were a network of donors. 650 donors, not just Chennai Vasis, but from around the world, got together. Today, we are serving against our mission that no one will go hungry. We set a mission saying, let's serve 1 million people. That is translated, today we are doing 31,000 meals a day, spending just under 10 lakhs. The resources, that thanks to this generous 650 people, we have the resources now to continue to serve till the 3rd of May, which is what the corporation has requested us, and has also told us that in case we need to do a little tapering off for the next few days, to be prepared for that. So thanks to all of that, we are working towards that mission of 1 million, and we have the resources to do that. Thank you. Back to you, Sriram.
Thank you, Mr. Ramraj, for that very succinct summing up of what is a very huge initiative. I was just looking at all the panelists, and I was thinking to myself that almost all of us in this panel today, we are just within a kilometer or so of one of the biggest famine initiatives in Indian history. When a canal was dug across this city to ensure that people had work and they were fed at the end of the day. And that was the great 1875-1876 famine, when the Buckingham Canal was dug right across the city, connecting what was called the Northern Canal, which came from Pedaganjam in Orissa right up to Basin Bridge, and the Southern Canal, which began at Adyar and went all the way up to Kadalur and Marakanam. And the Buckingham Canal cut its way across the city because people were flooding the city seeking food. There were food riots. And in order to control it, they were ensuring that work was available, and at the end of the work, food was also available for the people. It was one of the very unsung pieces of documentation in Indian history. And it requires a huge amount of coordination. How do you dig a canal? How do you feed the people? And I think Bhumika, which Jayendra is spearheading, is a similar instance of a huge amount of coordination, a network that is being built. And in a way, it's like a canal because it snakes its way across the entire city, reaching out to people at various positions. So Jayendra, would you like to tell us about your experience in this whole thing?
Well, thank you, Sriram, and thank you all for having me as a representative of Bhumika on this webinar. Just want to give you a brief background of Bhumika. Started in 2001 as an impulsive response to the Gujarat earthquake. And since then, for the last 19 years, we have been in disaster relief. And before we finish one disaster, we are already finding ourselves in another. To just tell you that we are still working on the Chennai floods disaster, where we are still completing a school that we are building in Perambakam. In Kerala floods, we are still building a school in Kerala post the floods. After doing immediate relief, Bhumika doesn't get out of the picture. It stays on for the long run of rehabilitation, where we look at rekindling people's livelihoods. And therefore, to restart livelihoods, we help the small entrepreneur, from the barber to the petty shop owner to the plumber to the weaver. We try to get everybody back on their feet. But of all the disasters that we have seen, probably this one has been very, very different. Usually there is something that differentiates between the people who are affected and the people who are giving. But in this disaster, almost everybody across the board is affected and or susceptible to be affected. And at the same time, we have to get people to come and give. So it's been a very, very unique experience being a part of this disaster. And I should really place on record the wonderful youngsters who have come forward to volunteer at this time and be the forefront of our trust and reach out to all the needy people. From the time we started this disaster, like any other disaster, we work very, very closely with the government because that's where we feel the maximum impact as an NGO we can achieve. So our first response to any disaster is our own study of what is going on and what is required. But more importantly, what the government feels are the cracks or where people will, there are certain kinds of sectors that might not get the attention that they deserve. So we look for people who might fall within these cracks and try to target our strategy and our attention to these people so that whatever we are doing has the maximum impact. In the part of this disaster, our initial response was senior citizens. We started a helpline for senior citizens and immunity compromised people. And we were ferrying dialysis people to dialysis, so serving the senior citizens in terms of food and medicine and basic needs that they required. And at the same time, we targeted the migrant labor. And as of today, we have impacted over 35,000 of those people, serving ration kits all across the city and in the Tiruvallur district. And initially, we didn't get into the serving the cooked food because of the kind of calamity and disaster this was. But once we realized there were certain needs and the corporation approached us to serve cooked food as well, we have been taking great care to serve a selected group of migrants who are in lodges with families and children, cooked food that will meet the needs of families. So this, and by large, is the kind of work that we have been doing, and we hope to understand from the government, understand from the officers, what is the requirement going forward and how long it will require. And that guidance alone will help us stay invested in this crisis for as long as it wants, because only when we portray a very, very clear picture to our donors and supporters, everybody come forward to stay with us in the long run. I have to say this, and without this, it won't be complete, that in our interaction with the officials of the corporation, it has been a joy to see the responsible way in which these officers have been working with us. People following up at 6 in the morning to see whether the food is ready so that the food will reach on time, and following up at 9 in the night to see whether a migrant group has received rations. It's been really a joy to watch officers taking such good responsibility and care for the needy and the people who have been really suffering a great deal in this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayendra. I was having a long quote from Adi Shankara as a build-up for Dr. Janaki Raman, but one of our audience, and incidentally, we've got 100 people now logged into this program. And we have a question from Krishna Ramachandran, which I think ideally leads to what Dr. Janaki Raman does. It says, while many organizations are providing food and basic needs, how shall we build empathy in these times and retain that later? I think in those two lines, he's kind of summed up everything as to the psychological impact of this traumatic situation. And so I'm now going to ask Dr. Janaki Raman to please speak and tell us about what is being done and what can be done.
Sure, Mr. Sriram. Thank you so much and for the entire team for the opportunity. In fact, we from Chakram Foundation were very clear on one aspect before getting this activity initiated. Point number one, the situation of the inmates, whoever were not able to travel. This is one sector that we wanted to concentrate upon, because switching between the channels at home, we get into a lot of stress. Like, we look upon TVs and then, understand what happens outside and imagine what can happen probably. So this gives us an individual stress. But however, the inmates who are here, who had no communication, at least for the first 2 days, to understand what is happening around and why we are being as an inmate, a high level of stress, anxiety, and a kind of a depression can also happen with these people. This was envisaged by us, and at the right time we requested Chennai Corporation, and they were kind enough to give us this opportunity to work with the people. Now we are approaching 96 shelters, which includes community centers and shelters of corporation, where 5,602 people are now being an inmate. I would rather say now being an happy inmates rather. So these people have got different thoughts with them. And we decided a strategy of making it into 4 teams. And these 4 teams will visit across the portions of Chennai. And these team members are preferably multilingual. Because when we talk about their emotions and then their feelings, it would be better to go with their language to touch them more and to understand it better. So this gave us, and we decided to make 2 rounds, one after the next week, the second round. The first round, we were able to understand their feeling. And this gave us an idea how to work with them, because not everybody can be not everybody can be approached so easily and then given a counseling. They may not be able to accept it. So that area we were concentrating upon, and we really took a positive psychology approach and some suggestive psychotherapy methods to make them active. And in the shelters, we gave them some activities, divided them into teams, 2 groups or something, identified a leader from themselves, train them on certain activities which they can spend productively and effectively 20 minutes at least a day. So this makes them to wait for the next day to do the same activity. The 20 minutes is not a limitation. It can even go for hours together as well. If they're so this one thing ensures a harmony, because in many of the stations, we see people from Tamil Nadu, from Odisha, from West Bengal, Jharkhand, Assam, all of them have got one thing in common, which is Hindi, but which also at times becomes difficult for people to understand. So identifying them into groups and then getting into their mind is one most critical important thing. Secondly, we Chakram Foundation also do certain telecounseling over phone to people who are quarantined or isolated themselves, because this is an area where advisors doesn't help. I mean, a real counseling, getting into their mind, listening them is more important. And we really felt a positive feedback from all these people. There is some person to come and listen to us. And that itself made a lot of motivation. And many programs like expressing their talents, we were able to see a lot of people play who also have got guitars with them playing that, and singing songs, cutting jokes, and all those aspects were also positively seen. And one thing we were able to strongly do is that we were able to give them a good amount of hope that in the coming days, the mental strength of yours is really required, because what we foresee here is that a 20 or 30 days of lockdown duration will really make them feel inactive. All those days they have been working for 10 hours, 12 hours as a laborers, and getting back after 30 days of stagnation will literally give them a mental breakdown as well. So what we did in that verge, what we did is that, see, there are about some carpenters, there are about some kind of building contracting laborers. So we said, what is the challenge that you have faced in your industry? For example, if you are a caterer, how do you cook for 1,000 people? If you're a plumber, how to make a repair of a small things at home? These kind of hope kind of discussions also happened with the people. So they formed a group, they discussed about, so at least 10 of them now know how to work upon this area. So this is something we found it. And secondly, they are literally happy about what they are today. This is not just for the forum I'm addressing, because for a person, the socio-psychological need is basically one thing, the shelter and food. I mean, rest other factors are also there. However, the first word that we use and tell them is that you are the only secured community in the society right now available, without any kind of infected situation or something, and you can be very free, literally in a shelter, and this is an opportunity given to you, like for 20 or 30 days. So they are taking it in the positive note, and they are happy. The second round, when we go, they welcome with an applause, literally, which we never expected in many of the stations. So irrespective of language, the harmony is quite good. The care that is being given by the revenue officials at that particular location, I must thank this also. Give you a thank, because the entire team was a family, and this feeling was also quite comfortable with them. So this is a briefing about the activity that we do at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Janaki Raman. I was so reminded of in 1947, when partition happened and refugees were pouring into Delhi, and the big challenge was how to keep the refugees happy in the refugee camps. And they ran Mickey Mouse cartoons morning to evening on large screens with a cine projector. That was the only thing that they could think of at that time. Today, I think we are in far more fortunate situations when there are several more avenues available for entertainment and for cheering up people. We have time for a quick second round among the panelists. And I would like to go back to Dr. Albie John to start, and then proceed in the same order. I'll field one question to each one of you, and I request you to reply in 2 to 3 minutes, so that we have sufficient time after this we have questions coming in as well, and so we would like to ask those questions too. Dr. Albie John, we are reaching, hopefully we are reaching the end of this lockdown period, and we have a week to go. What do you expect from the people as the corporation? People have said that everybody today has paid encomiums for the way the officials have acted, the way the organizations that support this whole thing have acted. At the same time, in society there will always be some irresponsible elements. We have had stories of people going on joyrides, being apprehended, people being careless, and so on and so forth. As a representative of probably the oldest civic body in the whole of Asia, what is it that you would like to tell us? What is it that you expect from us, the people?
Yeah. So thank you, Sriram. So we would like to tell that probably it is another week, and we all know that it has been a tough month. I mean, it's almost 30 days, and it is probably one of the toughest months that would have happened in all our lives. I mean, somebody was telling that some hospitals or some particular monuments were never closed in Chennai ever. So thus, that kind of monuments, that kind of churches, that kind of other historical places are currently closed. So probably in their lifetime, this is happening for the first time. And probably this will be the first time, this will be the only time in most of our lifetimes also. So it is yes. So this,
hopefully.
Yes. So we know that this is a tough time, but this is the time where we all need to come together, and we need to support the people who are actually fighting the real battle. I understand that it is tough for us. It is tough for us to stay in our houses, stay in our homes, and probably spend the day just like that. But imagine the situations where our frontline staff, that includes the healthcare professionals, the paramedics, doctors, sanitary workers, police personnel, including the middle-level administrators, middle-level government officials. Some people are visible, some people are not visible. Still, they are working there. We are able to be secure in our houses because all these people are spending a good amount of time outside in a very risky situation. And when the number of cases are coming up, and when there is more spread in the city also, it is also possible that the risk is also increasing. But they don't have the luxury of staying home. So for the people who have the luxury of staying home, stay home and stay safe. That is the first thing that we would like to request. And the second thing is that we had from the Chennai Corporation, we had an advisory on wearing of mask a few days back. And we are thankful that the citizenry was very cooperative, and a lot of people, when you go out, if at all there are people on the streets, all of them are wearing masks. So we would like to get that support in a continuous manner. That is the second thing that we would like to ask. The third thing is that there are people, I mean, everybody has a problem. For the privileged ones, or the people have their own problems. Underprivileged ones, or the people from the lower socioeconomic strata, they also have their own problems. The thing that we would like to understand and we would like to reiterate is that this is the time for all of us to stay together and stay strong. And then we can tide this over, and the times of corona will definitely go, and the city will definitely bounce back, and this will just be like a bad dream. All of us are sure about that. So this is just a bad dream that we are living in, and we are hopeful that this will go as soon as possible. So we just have to, continue the good work that we are doing.
Thank you, Dr. Albijon. I move on to Mr. M. Murugappan. Sir, you began when you spoke. You said about 100 years, of handling various kinds of situations, challenges. I'm sure this is a completely unprecedented kind of a scenario that even an organization with that kind of experience is facing at this point of time. Going forward, in a corporate scenario, what do you think are going to be some of the will-do points that we will have to take up, so that we can ensure that there are no major outbreaks in future? What do you think is going to happen in a corporate scenario?
I think the most important thing from any corporate or any institution is the safety, security, and good health of people. So whatever we do as a corporate, even if we, as we think of opening up, etc., post-May, hopefully, is that all factories, all plants, they normally have startup protocols. And these are largely technical protocols. But what is extremely important to industry particularly is that we have to have a health and hygiene protocol. And this protocol must be along the lines of the public health authorities as to what they have prescribed. Only if that is done can businesses restart. And we need to continue these protocols right through. I would think at least, as an ongoing practice, this is going to become a standard practice. It should become a standard practice. It should not be only for because of this pandemic. It has to become a standard practice. So from our perspective, from the corporate perspective, health, hygiene, healthcare is primary. And only after that can we look at starting up plants and ensuring that plants are up and running. From a business perspective, it's very simple. We have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you. I'll move on to Mr. Ramraj. We are, as you said, we are reaching the, we are looking at May 3rd, and you spoke about, resources being available for up to May 3rd, and then a tapering off period as well. How long do you think, in your estimation, is this tapering off period going to be? And how much more of hand-holding will be required? And in terms of, because once employment begins, don't you think people will be able to have access to food? So when do you think you'll be able to wean people gradually off this scheme and get them to going back to their normal pace of life and activity? What do you think about that?
I wish on 4th it will become 0. That I think is wishful.
Yeah.
But I hope it will be 0, and that, with partial opening up and employment, things improve. What we have, just talking to people on the ground and listening in, we have factored in starting at about 50%, going down to 25% for a week. That's what. From 3rd to 10th, we've been looking at reducing it in a tapered way and hoping that by the 10th, things should be closer to normal. It all depends, I think, when public transport starts getting open. I think that will make a huge difference to the movement. Currently, I think people have to fend for themselves or corporate buses. So the big indicator for us of tapering or not having to support is the opening up of public transport. We're waiting for that date announcement. Currently, we are planning a 50% for a week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ramraj, for that. Jayendra, you began with the Gujarat earthquake, and the major learning of the Gujarat earthquake, as we all know, was building housing that could sustain earthquakes in future in several places that was implemented. We look at the Chennai floods, conservation of water bodies, at least on paper, has been a major topic, and there's been a major debate on it. Definitely, there's a lot of awareness about conservation of water bodies ever since the 2015 floods. And I think implementation is still happening, even though it's a little slow. People are aware of it. From the Bhumika experience, what do you think are going to be the key takeaways as far as society is concerned from this pandemic? How can they be better prepared for the future? I talk about the elderly, the people who don't have access. What is it, do you think, that we should be doing to ensure that they find such a process a little less difficult in future?
Actually, I don't think this crisis or this disaster leaves us with much to get prepared for something like this. I think this is unprecedented, and in a lot of ways, I don't know whether we can prepare for something like this, especially the senior citizens and the vulnerable and the immunity compromised people. From the number of cases that we have had, where it is under normal times, it will be a normal medical emergency. At these kind of times becomes extraordinary medical emergency. So, and the hospitals have been busy and prepared for COVID than anything else. And at this time, I'd like to say that other than supporting the migrant workers, we have been working to support the medical staff on the front line, providing them with the PPEs and the N95 masks, etc. Because I think they are the frontline warriors for this crisis, and we wanted to support them in whatever way we could. So we have been doing that. But I don't think this crisis has, so far, I don't think people have an idea how to prepare themselves for something like this in the future. At the same time, I would like to say that if you look at the number of people who, the migrant workers, the daily wage earners, and many more, not even the daily wage earners, people who have been employed, the number of people who can lose their jobs based on the performances of the companies, people, small and medium companies that will go out of business, or I don't know how many people will be able to tide over this crisis very easily. So, as a NGO, as a trust which is into disaster relief, I feel that this will need for us to stay invested in a much longer time on the rehabilitation phase than any other disaster that we have encountered so far.
Thank you for that, Jayendra. I move on to Dr. Janaki Raman. I think we are getting a set of questions which are very, very related to what Jayendra said, and also which I think Dr. Janaki Raman may have to field. One of the questions is from Mr. R.K. Raghavan, who himself was an extremely senior official in the police, director of the CBI, and then recently the ambassador to Cyprus. And he has asked, I'm going to field a couple of questions to you, Dr. Janaki Raman, because I think they all come under your perspective at this, your purview at this point of time. So one of them, and Mr. Raghavan's question is, what do you have to say about the role of the police in the current scenario? What are the positives and the negatives? I would like to probably reword it a little. And yes, the police has played an excellent job in this whole thing, a very stressful situation. Going forward, what do you think could be some of the aspects of counseling that the police could take up?
True. A very, very true and a valid point and question. Psychologically, whenever there is an impact, when you take with respect to the professions, there are two professions which are very critical and vulnerable to prone to more of psychological impacts to them. One is, the first and foremost, is nursing, because you see patients, you take their emotions, and then it is back of the mind, this will give a big impact. The second condition is policing, because it involves a criminal psychology as well to understand the situation. See, they'll have to really bifurcate between a real needy person and also a rule breaker. Now, because of the rule breaker, their attitude and then behavior also changes, and this impacts a very few amount of a public who is also really in need. Now, I would rather rate there should always be a mental stability in handling the situation. However, this pandemic was not, affected elsewhere, or we have no experience of handling such a pandemic situation. And one thing, if the police regulation goes high, then the psychology of people also changes. They think, okay, something extreme is happening. So to avoid the stress level, government will also not force this much of regulations immediately or through the police. The policing will not go strict day by, once and overnight. So what happened is, the police also have been doing a proper policing in levels, like mildly controlling the situation, heavily controlling the situation, and there are a lot of humorous activities being done by the police officials as well. This itself is a stress buster for them and for the public. However, a kind of genuinity in understanding the real situation is required. In fact, the commissioner of police was also mentioning, everybody who comes out has got a medical prescription and says he has to go to the medical shop. So they'll also have a difficulty in getting it realized. Now, the responsibility neither lies with the police nor with the nursing staffs. It lies with every individual to be socially responsible, because this is a condition where the pandemic cannot be controlled once it breaks out. So it's not about blaming anybody. However, their mental health is also required. So what we have also planned from Chakram Foundation is to give a mental health support to the firemen, to the police officials, and to the corporation staffs, whoever are there day and night with all these people, which will literally make them come as a stress level as down. Because post the pandemic, the immigrants or anybody who is staying here will get back to the normalcy. However, the workload for the other officials will increase. So this is one area we really need, the entire society need to really work upon. And we have seen a good amount of responsibility with police, whereas the social responsibility with the individuals who move out for no reason are to be controlled by themselves.
Thank you.
I hope I have answered that.
You have.
I have a small request. Can all the questions be redirected to the Q&A box, please? So it's easier for Sriram to kind of review it. Thank you.
I noticed that Arvind Balaji is in the audience. Can he just speak about his experience, and let's see what his group is doing at this point of time in this crisis. I'd just like to I'd like to hear from him on that. There are some questions as well after this for which we need to make time.
While he comes, Feed My Chennai has had support from Lucas TVS. We've been getting 2,000 lunches from them every day to distribute to the migrant and
go ahead, Arvind.
So thank you, Arvind.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Arvind.
Like many other companies, I guess we are trying to do the best we can under the circumstances. So we're obviously using all the facilities at our disposal to help all the people who don't have food and things like that. So all plants all over India, the canteens are running. We do thousands of food packets every day. We give it to the migrant workers in poor areas. And in some cases, the corporations have told us where they want the food, so we go and give the food there. We've also helped some NGOs get provisions that our companies can organize better than they can get and give it to them so they can in turn redistribute. So that we've done. We've contributed to the CM fund as well as the PM fund. We have opened a shelter near our factory in Chennai, a 100-bed facility where people under quarantine, not yet COVID patients, but under quarantine and observation, we are funding that and taking care of their needs. So I guess in our own way, we're trying to do what we can. We are obviously keeping all the jobs and trying to do what the PM requested us to do, to keep as many people as employed while we go through this hell. And now we are slowly trying to see how we can restart. Now that's going to be a whole new ballgame. And while we're on this panel, I might as well say it. I mean, we've been going through every step of the way. How do we restart a factory and then not have a COVID patient and shut down the factory? And we've gone, along with Maruti, actually, we've been working out step by step, minute by minute, what should be the actions. And the fact of the matter is, this is going to be, restarting is going to be a nightmare. And I think there are going to be instances where you'll start and there will be a COVID patient and then we'll stop, and then it's just going to be crazy. And I think how we work together, as well as we have worked together in the shutdown, how well we work together in restarting is going to be another test. So I don't think we should underestimate that when things open up, things will be back to normal. I think it'll be a different normal. And I think there'll be a lot of challenges in getting us restarted again. I think we need the same momentum that got us united in the downturn back while we reopen. So I think it's going to be a few more months before we really see some degree of normalcy.
Thank you, Arvind. I also noticed that Sriram Vijay is in the audience. Can we hear from him as well?
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sriram. I think Arvind has already talked a little bit about what the group is.
Srirams always stick together.
No, I think Arvind has already talked a little bit about what the group is doing. Similar to, I think, Lucas, we are doing food packets near many of our factories. Kitchens were working around the clock to kind of get that delivered. We are working with local associations and the government organizations to see what else we can do to support, including distributing face masks where possible. The biggest concerns, as Arvind mentioned, is around restarting and what the new normal will be. I think there's a lot of things India can learn from other countries in terms of how we restart, and we are bringing some of those best practices, like Arvind says, into the factories as well as the culture we have to work with. One of the most interesting things that we have also started in the last 3 weeks has been an initiative that actually my uncle Gopal Srinivasan kind of put a few of us onto within the group. We took on the opportunity there to see, what are the special needs during COVID that we can support with. And one of the big areas that we started looking at was medical devices that might be in shortage, right? We've all heard about the frontline workers requiring PPE, and there are many groups working on that across the country. So we had actually started looking at the need for ventilators, for respiratory support for patients who are suffering from COVID-19. So we had formed a small task team, including from the Murugappa group. A few people had joined from Lucas TVS, Breaks India. We started brainstorming and working with the IIT Madras health technology team. So we made actually tremendous progress in the last 3 weeks, and we have devices, order of 10 prototypes ready. We've gone to 4 hospitals around Chennai, and it's amazing what kind of support we've gotten, right? We've talked to the health secretary, Dr. Bila Rajesh. We've gone and met the government hospital, Dr. Jayanti, the dean at MMC. We've also met 3 or 4 private hospitals, and we've gotten tremendously good feedback for the device we have built. Of course, I think the government was doing an excellent job managing the numbers in India, so the need is probably not there at this moment. I think we'll have to see when the country does reopen how those cases do spike. But the tremendous advantage I think something like this could bring is that, ventilators are extremely expensive, in short supply globally. So this is a device that many countries are looking at. The FDA has approved recently for emergency use during this crisis. So that's one of the small things that we think we can bring to support in such a crisis.
Thank you, Sriram. I also, dovetailing from what Sriram said about ventilators, it's great that Professor Satya Chakravarti from the Indian Institute of Technology is right here in the audience. And I think, Vanitha, if you can pass on the, if you could get him to come on and speak about what is it that, what are the challenges in getting an affordable ventilator? And then how do you use that ventilator? Because from what little I know, even using a ventilator is it's not just plugging it on and telling somebody to breathe. I think there's a lot of training that is involved. So how is it that IIT is going to tackle it? And do you realize that if you succeed in this, you're probably breaking one of the greatest challenges in medical technology, because you're creating an affordable ventilator? So would you like to talk about it, Professor?
Right. Thank you very much, Sriram, for calling me to say something. So we started the COVID war, if you will, with actually trying to do something that we can easily do, which was to make face shields in addition to the masks that health workers are wearing, because there is a paucity of N95 masks. So is it possible for us to augment the usual, the normal cloth mask with something more protective? So our students actually came up with the idea of having a 3D printed headband with a face shield, and we quickly put that out significantly. I think we have been able to distribute something like of the order of over 32,000 face shields to different government hospitals and police stations. It's gone all the way to Chidambaram and Sirgari as well. And the other thing that we have also done about that is we have been sharing the engineering drawings for anybody else to actually recreate these anywhere else in the country. We'll quickly put out all these things in the website and have a press release as well. But while there, to specifically answer the question that you asked, we obviously wanted to actually move up the value chain and do something to the medical community. So I got talking to a bunch of doctors and medical devices people on what is it that we could do. I come from an aerospace engineering background. So what we found was that ventilators is like the last resort typically for most patients. And when we're now jumping the gun and saying that everybody should be making ventilators, it somewhat didn't make sense to me, because there could be a lot of other things in between that we may be missing just because we are actually going to do something very big. So I did talk to them, and then I found that, yes, indeed, my hunch was correct. And there are a whole bunch of other medical devices that could support ventilators as well as augment ventilator use. And one of the things that was of import substitution variety was to actually make something called a positive pressure device, which is a small blower, like a handheld blower, that now enables ventilators to be used in let's say these quarantine hostels that we hopefully will not get to see being used, but are being readied right now. So if you now move to those quarantine hostels where ventilator used as we adopted, they don't have the kind of infrastructure like compressed air and so on. So these turbine blowers will come in handy, and similarly they can also be used in other oxygen masks for breathing support without having to resort to ventilators. So we have been doing those. We have been doing something called helmet CPAPs, which again will not spew the virus in the air around the patient for the medical staff to contract the virus. We also are actually making what's called as positive pressure respirators, which are like advanced level PPEs that medical staff in ICUs can use. So these are now prototyped, and we are now talking to manufacturers who can actually take it up for mass manufacturing. While there, I'm also actually interested in very actively working on what does it take to actually lift the lockdown. And several people here talked about opening up factories and so on. So a couple of those ideas are actually doing some data analytics that can actually predict what will be the surge in cases in a particular area in the next 2 or 3 days, so that we can actually go and just lock down that place alone and then let the other people free. And the second thing is it possible for us to actually develop a medical kit along with artificial intelligence beyond just your thermal scanner that's being used today, so that it can be deployed in factory entrances or airports or any of those places, so that we can quickly screen people based on multiple medical parameters than just the body temperature, and see if they need to be tested, because testing is a huge problem. And we need to actually test as many people as possible. And if you now get into the community spread situation, we don't have a basis for who to test and who not to test. And so we are trying to actually develop something that will enable that to be done in a more effective way.
Thank you. We have plenty of questions actually coming up.
Sriram, sorry to interrupt. I just have an announcement to make. Request everyone to redirect questions from the chat window to the Q&A, and I shall request Sriram to take questions from the Q&A section only. Thanks.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you. I was just, see, there is a question that has come up. which I think is very, very interesting. And it is asked by my good friend, Vaidya Subramaniam Seturaman of Shastra University, where he says in the long term, a war chest is what is really required to fund calamities like this. And he then goes on to ask this question: what more charitable policy making does the panel expect from the Ministry of Finance to further the cause of such charities, in terms of, take for instance, initiatives where the public is being reached out to? Any path-breaking reform or removing existing pain points that the Finance Ministry can think of? Would Mr. Ramraj or Jayendra like to field that question?
So we got 650 plus people to participate. But in order to get that, we had to find a foundation that had ATG. We had to find somebody that had a payment gateway to get a local credit card, but that would not accept an international credit card. We had to find another one for that. Then FCRA, another one. FCRA could not give it to us, so they paid the kitchens directly. So, and all to get done at a calamity, we were fortunate because of the network to be able to do it in 24, 36 hours. But this was just, I think, not unusual. This was unusual. And so I think the ability to have a platform to raise money itself from crowd, all our citizens are more than happy around the world to support. But it is like ease of doing many things here. Ease of collecting is not there. So I'm not yet sure, just the platforms, if we can unify, that itself would make life a lot easier.
Jayendra, would you like to add to that?
Yes, we are a FCRA approved organization, so we get a lot of donations from abroad. But what is typically happening now is people all over the world are seeing the kind of initiatives that we are involved with, and we don't even know the people. They are sending money to our bank accounts, and the bank calls us and says, "Who is this from?" And we don't know who it is from. And they say, if you don't say who this donor is, or whether they are Indian passport holder or a foreign passport holder, an NRI who is an Indian passport holder can send the FCRA to an Indian rupee account, and a foreign passport holder to a dollar account. So if we don't answer by the end of the day, the money goes back, and then we are left with the donor reaching out to us after 15-20 days saying that the money came back. Why didn't your bank accept the money? So I think there are some glitches there which has to be ironed out and made easier. Because today, I think a large amount of people, initially at least, when the calamity happens, are ready to reach out and support whatever they can. And I think that is the time it is critically that we make sure that the donations come through glitch-free.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jayendra. Mr. Murugapan, there are lots of questions that are coming through about job losses in the wake of this entire crisis and the understandable downturn that the industries are going to face once they open up and come back. And this question is, how are it's from Mr. Emmanuel Peter. How are the startups prepared to address job losses in this deflationary macro environment? Seeking inputs from the Murugappa Group, is there any sustainable support or empowering mechanism available to feed? Of course, that is a separate question, that's on food. But the main question is about job losses, and what do you think is the safety net that can be extended?
Sriram, the job losses are likely to take place because industry will start up only in a phased manner. We will not be able to start up immediately. There's a lot of work to be done before we start up. But as we start up, there are so many people in the supply chain to the industry. So when you work with small and medium industries who are very much an integral part of the supply chain. I think the most important thing to do is to have a very detailed, transparent dialogue as to what each supplier industry and a producer industry can do for each other. I think this dialogue is an absolute must, as also a dialogue with the bank. Because if they have taken bank funding, the bank also wants to know how that cash flow is going to be handled. So a very detailed dialogue on the premise of fundamental cash resources of every company, that being the core of everything, that dialogue will definitely help. I cannot say it will alleviate the pain of job losses, etc. Secondly, institutions which can afford this in terms of being able to withstand this for a length of time, I think they should make the effort. There are talks about institutions, and quite naturally, every institution, there are talks naturally about looking at whether we should take reductions in compensation, etc. And my only advice there is spread it out over a period of time rather than taking large reductions for shorter periods of time. Because this is not going to go away, and it's going to be right through the year 2021 and perhaps into 21-22 also. Now, as regards startup, I'm really not in a position to say what it is, but maybe Ramraj could also help us from that perspective. But from a startup perspective, what I would say is to go back to the investors and to talk to the investors and tell them, look, the plans are still the same, it's afoot, but we do need these investments. And therefore, either we will seek more funding or spread out the plans that we have made in the past.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Ramraj, would you like to supplement?
So coincidentally, Sriram, just before this meeting, we had a meeting with Rajan Anandan and Karthik Reddy, who spoke about a fund that they put together called the Action COVID Fund, I think it's called something ACT. 100 crores the VCs have come together and raised to help startups survive this period. And wherever there have been innovative ideas that could be taken to fund them actually to see the idea through. So there are, starting is that how to make sure salaries are paid. SIDBI has been given some money to fund funds. Our government has taken steps to actually find ways to fund orders startups have, to fund receivables they have, so that there is liquidity for startups to survive and the job losses would get minimized. There is, I think, the gap between intent and actually money reaching is where I think all of us need to apply our mind to just make sure it happens quickly.
Thank you. I will take the last three questions before we wind up the session. One is definitely to Dr. Janakiraman, because it talks about what is going to be, I'll just locate this question. I read it in this, in fact, we're getting so many questions here that it's quite a challenge to, but I thought there was a,
Q&A, Sriram, if you
yes,
see.
no, I am looking at the Q&A, but it's just jumping, it's going, there are questions coming all the time. So there was a question here. Okay, my apologies to whoever asked it, but I did read it a little while ago. I've not, and my vision is never very great in these things. So I just wanted to say, there was this question which said, what is going to happen post this opening up? What is the psychological counseling that is needed once people get on to working? We've had psychological counseling for lockdown situations. What are the challenges that are going to face people when they get back to work? This is a question that's been asked over here.
True. We need to differentiate it into two areas. Area one is for the general public, right? The second one is for the working people. Now, I mean, even very theoretically also, the Maslow's hierarchy says the job security is the first thing. There should be a kind of confidence that between the management and the individual that, okay, your job is secure. This feeling they have to get it, or some sort of a soothing talks to the employees can help having a productive employment people. Like, right now, from right now on, the messages can go from the companies, because the lockdown is not only a mental relaxation. It is not at all a mental relaxation literally for these employees who are worrying about their job. Rather, it would give them a stress on how do we handle the situation post this. Secondly, for the public, this is going to be a situation not for everyone, but for certain people. We call it as a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, post this pandemic, how am I going to come out? This was faced on many occasions, like Ebola virus from various other countries. And this situation, people may not know, am I safe to go to a mall? Am I safe to go to a place where in public, will this virus be inside a person? These are all the psychological fear which will be there with the people. But however, the practices like washing hands and the hand hygiene and rest of the practices, social distancing, if it is practiced on a regular basis, this can gradually come down. And we from Chakram Foundation are also happy to say that for the employees of cabin pressure who have got being at home and not going to work, you can also give us a call and give us a shout. We are there to support those organizations in a webinar or something, like we can do this, because it is all that we do now at this moment is purely for a give back to the society. Like end of the day, everybody has to become socially responsible by understanding this many panelists who have done a lot of things to the society. There are many things that I can do. This automatically comes to them. And secondly, with respect to the public, that can also be addressed as a group demographically with respect to the areas we can go approach and then talk to them and give them a hope of point, like there is something that you can look beyond in life. This is possible.
Thank you. The last two questions, I'll direct them to Dr. Albie John because they are directly involving the corporation. The first one is from Rajagopal and Venkatraman. What is the corporation's view on educational institutions, especially the schools catering to the underprivileged with lack of access to remote learning technologies? I think it's a very interesting question because work from home, learn from home, what happens if the infrastructure isn't there? How are we going to handle it? So I think that is a very valid question that I would like you to take, Dr. Albie John. The other question is from Aruna Subramaniam, and it says question to Dr. Albie John. So I don't have the freedom of passing it on to anyone else. As Jayendra said, we have to stay invested for a very long time with COVID, as it's not going to go away. So if social distancing is going to be your norm for another year, what will happen to the daily wage earner? If you take domestic help, will people take them back, or will they think it is safer not to have any of these people because you don't know where they have been, what infection they are bringing in? Will you give your clothes for ironing? Will you go out and patronize restaurants, entertainment industry, or will they all lose jobs? How are we going to sustain support in the long time? Can we identify this gap that NGOs would need to work towards in future? So this is the second question. First one was on the schools. Second one is this.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer both questions in a short manner. When it comes to the educational institutions, whatever we have lost now is a small window. That is around 30 days we have lost. So when it comes to a boy's educational career, 30 days is not a big thing. But if we are going for an extended lockdown, it is definitely a more important, very, very difficult and very important scenario. But other than that, I would like to address regarding the mental health of our kids. That is something that we will have to invest a lot on. I mean, it won't affect them if they are not going to the school for 30 days or 60 days or 3 months, that is 90 days. Academically, it won't be a big thing. But when it comes from the mental health and evolution of a kid as an adult, it could be a big problem for him. That is, we need to, in each and every neighborhood, in each and every family, each and every household, we need to reassure our kids that things are going to be fine, which is something many of these times we are not addressing the genuine concerns and the genuine anxiety of our kids. I think that is something that we will have to focus on, and we will have to we will have to ensure that the emotional health is unaffected. 30 days, when it comes from an academic point of view, 60 days, 90 days, even if it is 1 year, we can always address that. But the other things that schools address too, the emotional growth, or the way a kid's personality is being developed. Remarkably, when we look at world history, periods like this, periods of famine, periods of crises like this, they always bring a gloom to the society. We should be proactive that such a scenario is not coming to us. And if such a scenario comes, the next generation, the generation probably in their teens now, they will get affected. Their emotional health will go for a toss for their entire lifespan. So probably we need to take very proactive steps on this regard, and definitely we'll come with a plan for that. That is the first part. Secondly, when it comes to the informal economy, as all we know,
I'll just interrupt you because there's another question of a very similar nature from Mr. Chandramouli Prabhakar, which is talking about the same thing. It says how people in the unorganized sector, such as flower vendors, ironmen, oil sellers outside temples, would be able to bounce back. So I'm just, rephrasing that.
So when it comes to informal economy, we all know that informal economy is one of the first to get affected when crises like this come. But we also should be knowing that they are the first to come back also when such crises are ending. So Indian entrepreneurs, Indian micro entrepreneurs are probably the smartest in the world. When there was the demonetization also, we all of us saw, how fast all the micro entrepreneurs, the small, the chartwala or somebody who is ironing clothes, they came with, they seamlessly, they integrated with the digital platforms. So I'm pretty confident, and I'm sure that the Indian micro entrepreneur will come with a solution for the social distancing, hand hygiene, and wearing of mask, the phobia associated with it also. At the same time, we as a society should be keen. We should take proactive steps to ensure that social distancing is not leading to social discrimination. Social distancing is more or less physical distancing. As on date, it is a physical distancing. It is a concept from a health and hygiene point of view. But when it evolves, if it is getting continued for another year or probably 6 months, 9 months, we can get into this bubble where we don't want people from probably the lower socioeconomic status to come to you. Or probably you don't want any intermingling between the people with the middle income class, the people with the low income set, or people with the rich people also. So we need to take proactive steps to ensure that social distancing is, for the time being, we are ensuring this to for the well-being of the society. But at the same time, we should prevent any attempts on social discrimination also. I think we need to address this issue from the government's level as also, but at more or less from a society point of view.
Thank you. And I think we are reaching the end of our time. A big thank you to all the panelists. You are all very, very busy individuals, and you have taken time out to be here in the time of this extraordinary situation, to be talking to us and sharing your experiences. I'm sure those who have attended would have benefited from this interaction. Now I hand over the mic to Vanita for her, final summations on behalf of CIC. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Sriram. Let me invite Trustee Arvind to close the session, please.
Thank you, Vanita. Thank you, Mr. Sriram.
Thank you.
I think over the last 1.5 hours, we have heard the most encouraging words and also hope. I'm absolutely sure most of you would agree that there's been no sense of despair or anxiety or even panic. That sends a lot of, I would say, kind of solace to us. And I only wish that with the phase what we're entering into, in case we have another session like this, we would come in a better frame of mind to only decide how to deal with this in future and not while we are facing it as such. And I thank the whole panel as such. As Mr. Sriram has already thanked on behalf of everybody, I must also thank, including Mr. Sriram, for having taken his time off to ensure that he is here. And I think it was an absolutely lively session. The only difference which we found was the time for asking questions had really been cut and the questions were filtered, and it helped understanding the most important ones to be put across to the panel. Thank you, Mr. Sriram, on that also. And finally, I think Vanita will wrap up by also telling us in case of any future programs are there. And I, on behalf of the trustees, thank one and all for having attended this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Arvind. Thanks, Sriram, and all the panelists who are here. So we'll meet. Thank you all for attending. Thanks to the attendees for taking the time out to join us. We will meet again next Saturday. We have the Principal Scientific Advisor, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, in conversation with Dr. Soumya Swaminathan and Dr. Mukherjee from University of Michigan. You will get the invites for the same. Hope to see you all back again. Thank you.